Hello and welcome to another episode of the 50 Years of Coptic History in Australia series. I'm Bishop Basilius. Today I'm joined by His Grace Bishop Angaelos of the Diocese of London. He's also one of our own from here in Sydney. As a brother in the monastery, what did your typical day look like?
Well, my typical day wasn't very typical because from the moment I entered, His Holiness Pope Shenouda took me under his wing. I was the first. Of course, Abuna Daniel had gone to the monastery earlier, but he had come from Sudan, he was older, and he had gone back. I was the first person who was pretty much grown up and nurtured in lands of migration, who had gone back to Egypt to join the monastery. And so I think His Holiness felt that he had to keep an eye on me. I'm not sure it was for my good or just so I didn't get into any trouble, but and providentially, I was there at the residence at Saint Bishoy, and I started to serve with His Holiness, and as someone who was administrating the papal residence, but then as Abuna Pavlos, who was here, whom I was serving with, traveled to America for the monastery there. I then started to take up a closer role with His Holiness, started to establish a secretarial role, which didn't exist in the monastery before, so that the secretaries from Cairo would come over and hand over. And so it started by me writing a letter. His Holiness would leave his letterheads, would leave his stamps, we'd start taking appointments. So it became almost a mirror of the secretariat in Cairo, because His Holiness would spend almost half the week in the monastery, weekly.
I know once you were consecrated as a monk and everything, you were papal secretary to His Holiness for several years. What was it like spending so much time with a pioneer of the Coptic Church and advocate for youth?
Well, it was wonderful that I wasn't just secretary, I was his son, I was his disciple. He was very much my mentor, my guide. And it was a learning experience. I was there for 6 full years. And you can imagine, first person seen in the morning, last person seen at night, with everything that happened. And I learned in so many ways from what His Holiness would teach me directly, because he was a mentor by nature. But also from how I would see him deal with particular situations. And also what I saw happening around him, because if you could imagine, everything that comes to the Pope is generally very complex. And so seeing him dealing with that and seeing what to avoid and what not to do is also important.
Going back to when you were a brother, you took on the name Arsenios. Why that name in particular?
Both the names, Arsenios and Angaelos, were chosen by the Pope. And I was very glad to have taken them on, because I did some research afterwards and got to know Saint Arsenios more. But they were both chosen for me.
Now, I understand that you also changed the spelling of Angaelos because people kept on mispronouncing it.
Yes, so I was tired of being Angelos, and so phonetically it was Angaelos with the AE sound. So
going back to your Sunday school days, there's a particular story involving yourself, Bishop Suriel, and Father Mauritius, and a certain Labib Bashara, who was your Sunday school teacher at the time. Do you know where I'm going with the story?
Not quite. There were so many things that happened with Labib.
It's been verified. There's a story of yourself and Abuna Mauritius in Sunday school in about year 3. And Bishop Suriel, who's several years older, had come in as well. And Labib Bashara you guys were making fun of his accent. Do you recall that story?
No, I can't remember. I mean, I can't remember being rash enough to make fun of Labib in any way, because that could have been very dangerous.
Okay. Abuna Mauritius has verified this. He remembers it very vividly. You guys were making fun of Labib's accent when he was speaking in English. And he gave all 3 of you a hit across the back of the head and said, "One day the 3 of you will be in the monastery."
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it was prophetic as well as wise.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard him tell the story as well. I'd wonder if he if he says, "I told you so" whenever he sees you.
Well, I mean, he's a wonderful influence. I've seen him during this visit, and I'm always very thankful to meet him, as well as Amutalat Metta, who I met. Those two were very formative in my growing up and my being mentored in service. So yes, we had wonderful memories, and lots of very funny things happened. That was just the kind of character he was.
Does Australia still feel like home, even though you've been overseas for so long?
It feels very familiar. It feels like coming home, but home is very much England now. And I've been in England for 23 years now.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, 23. I've been in England, yes, 23 years. It's longer than I spent here, but it's also where I've had my pastoral ministry, and you do end up with those connections. But coming here is very familiar with the faces, people I've served with, people I've served, people I've been served by. We're still at that time where I can still say I've met people I've been served by, and that's a good thing.
Now, the two words you mentioned earlier, Victoria Euros. Discuss.
Yes, well, that was our pilgrimage usually after some meetings or just before fasts, where we would go and stock up for the fast. But tragically, I usually come during fasts for some reason, but tragically I came one year and it was not during a fast, and we decided to go to Victoria Euros, and I couldn't even finish a quarter of it. So yeah, it must have been better days back then.
What are you doing after this interview? Maybe we should go down again.
Yes, maybe that could be a good thing.
Now, in 1995, you travelled to the UK to serve as a parish priest there. How did all that come about?
His Holiness had said to me that he wanted me, now that I'd received, because as I said, I served for 6 years with him. So His Holiness said that I'd had enough administrative experience. He wanted me to build up some pastoral experience. And in a funny sort of twist, I was given a choice between London and Honolulu. And at the time I said to His Holiness, you know me, you know the ministry, so you choose, I'm not going to choose. So it was London. I was there for 4 years as a monk priest until 1999, when I was consecrated as General Bishop, and I was General Bishop there from 1999 until 2017, when there was enthronement and the formation of the new Diocese of London.
What was it like sharing that experience with His Grace Bishop Suriel in 1999 when both of you were ordained as bishops, sharing that moment with your closest friend?
Well, it was wonderful, and there was also Amber David with us, of course. So on the day that Amber David and I were consecrated as monks, His Grace Amber Suriel was enthroned as the Bishop of London, as Bishop of Melbourne. And it was just wonderful to be there, the three of us, and it was just the three of us. And His Holiness Pope Shenouda was a very thoughtful man, and I think it was intentional that it was just the three of us. It created a very important bond, and it was just a very special day.
Now, at your enthronement as Bishop of London, you described it as the longest engagement period in history. Were you surprised at how long it took to become bishop of a diocese, or that were you expecting to become a bishop of a diocese at all?
It never really mattered to me. I was serving, I was blessed to be serving in the UK. I've baptized people who I am now marrying. And so it was a long-standing service. I'd never thought. It didn't really matter to me. And in all honesty, it was never even expected when it was announced, because even just before His Holiness Pope Tawadros had thought about doing this, there was an idea of me, because I was General Bishop and I could be moved, to become diocesan bishop somewhere else.
Going back 30 years, would you have believed anybody that would have said to you what you'd be doing right now?
No, it's so far from where I was, and I'm very thankful. Because I believe that God prepares us one step at a time. And it's important for us to always be open to His direction, especially when it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, then one day it will.
Now, one final question before we wrap up. The congregation in Australia, in Sydney in particular, has grown significantly since the early days and since you headed over to Egypt. Is there one thing perhaps missing nowadays that you would like to see back among the community, since we established so many other churches other than just the few that we had before?
Not really. When I come back, I'm really impressed by the number of youth that I still see attending these meetings. the fellowship that I see amongst them, the wonderful spirit about them. Change is inevitable, and it's important. Growth is natural.
Yeah.
I think we do ourselves and the ministry a disservice when we only look backwards and think how things were, because things never stay the same. And we should be thankful for how God directs our service and our ministry. We're thankful for today as we were thankful for yesterday, as we anticipate the wonderful things God will keep doing tomorrow.
Your Grace, it's been a pleasure having you here in Sydney again, back home, and here in the studio as always. May God continue to bless your service and ministry in the UK and overseas, and we hope to see you back here again at the next milestone of the Coptic Church in Australia.
Thank you. It's a blessing to be here.